say that it was bad, but yeah. So we can get wired into the fights that were on last night.
Yeah, so the show kicked off with Dillian Smith defending his Commonwealth title. How do you think he looked in his fight?
Yeah, I think he looked good. I thought the guy that he was fighting was game as well, and then it just ended up in a stoppage, which was good to see. But as I say, it wasn't. I mean, the guy was coming up in weight,
Yeah,
so it is what it is. It was competitive for as long as it lasted, but good to see a knockout. So it's going to be onwards for him. Not hugely competitive, but
yeah,
it is what it is.
yeah. As I said to you at the time last night, the size difference was just a huge telling factor for me.
Yeah,
With his opponent coming up from light heavyweight, I think he should go back down if he can, because I don't think he can compete at cruiserweight, considering that was only Commonwealth level fight.
yeah. You could see his when you could see he was struggling with the power of Billam Smith, because when he was knocked down several times, you could see when the ref was counting, he was taking the standing count. Like, he was like looking like he was breathing heavily, but not breathing heavily from being tired, but just breathing
No,
heavily as if to say, like, holy shit, this guy can punch, right?
yeah, yeah,
And I don't know if Billam Smith is a big puncher at the weight, but you could tell that he was struggling to with the power of Billam Smith.
yeah. And I think for Billiam Smith going forward, I think maybe he won't impose that sort of style in every fight, but I think with him, you can tell that he has the skill set to be able to adapt during the fight and introduce different elements of attacking in his offensive boxing. And I think now they're looking at the Riakporhe rematch, maybe.
Yeah, I'd like to see that, because the first fight against Riakporhe was quite close, if I remember right. I think it
Yeah,
was a split decision, that fight, I think.
yeah. I think it was the only telling fact was when Billy Smith got put down.
Yeah, yeah, I think that would have been a 10-8 round there. So if he'd stayed on his feet, he might have been a different outcome. But I'd like to see that fight again. It's one that I would have liked to have seen before
Yeah,
this fight again. Anyway, so we'll see. We'll see what happens there.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. I think it's definitely onwards and upwards for him. And then we had Hopi Price in his third fight. What do you make of that fight?
Yeah, it was very one-sided. I think I texted you at the time and said this is going to be every round to Hopi Price. But I say it was only his third fight, and I think
Yeah,
I remember it's the first time I've seen Hopi Price. But I thought he was. I mean, just looking at him, I thought I think he looks like a very good boxer.
yeah,
His movement's good, his feet are really good. So I think there's potential for Hopi Price there. Obviously, it'd be a while before we see him come up against you know really really tough, because it's only his third fight, but opposition. But it would, yeah. I like the look of him.
yeah. And I don't know if you remember, but the people tweeting in, watching him, he's got some quite big admirers. The likes of Leonard Ellaby was one, and I think he's definitely one to watch. It'd be good to see him at his actual fighting weight, though, because as I said to you last night, I feel that if he had a bit of power, I think he would have stopped the guy.
Yeah, yeah, he would have. I mean, Phillips was really not. He was doing he was doing some crazy things, right? He was his movement and stuff. He looked like a circus freak in there at times. Um, but he was just really struggling to get anywhere near Price. You know, he would try and get inside and then just hold, and he was taking punches all the time, and you know, he didn't win a round. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know how good Phillips is, but I mean, that was an easy night's work for Price. But as I
Yeah.
say, I mean, was that feather or super feather they fought last night?
I think it was 9-3.
Okay, so as I say, it's not a weight that you see a tremendous amount of knockouts at,
No.
but yeah, you know, it's if he could get some, you know, if he could get some power into his game, you know, he might become a real threat. But you know, it is what it is. I was really impressed with his boxing last night. Whether or not it was a, you know, the opposition wasn't that great or whatever it is, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I think he's certainly one or two quite young emerging talents that we've got to keep an eye on.
Yeah, his name's Hopi. I don't know where the hell you get that name from, but there you go.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm right in saying he's from a travelling background, so
Oh, okay, okay. I
yeah.
don't know. I don't know if that would explain his name, but
No,
we're
no.
getting.
So
I mean, something not boxing related, but people are naming their children stranger names all the time. I know some people of my generation have, you know, like where you were naming, you know, like people were naming their children good, solid Christian names, right?
yeah,
Not that I agree with that, but you know, it was Michael and David and you
yeah,
know, all the rest of it. But now, like people of my generation that are having kids, they're calling them. A lot of these people have given them American names, you know, like, or not American names, but names that you would particularly like, you know, like Tyler and
yeah,
things like that, like, or surnames that are foreign, you know, like people are naming their children their first names, and now they're giving them surnames as their first names. It's weird, but anyway,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
segueing off into something totally different there. So
yeah. So it'll be interesting to see where Price goes. That leads us on to Anthony Fowler. At times, I think it was a hard fight to watch because
oh yeah, oh yeah.
yeah,
I mean, Harper was getting the shit beaten out of him. And I mean, I think we said this in the preview, right? Well, I said it in the preview anyway, that I was worried about Harper's lack of knockouts. He hadn't had any knockouts in any of his fights.
yeah,
And now he was, give the guy his due, he was tough, right? He took a hell of a lot of punishment from Fowler. And Fowler looked just about twice the size of the guy, not in terms of height, but
yeah,
in terms of his shoulders and how broad he was, and his muscular. I mean, Harper just looked like a skinny guy, and Fowler's got a bit on him. So I thought it was a mismatch in terms of the size, but I was worried at one point midway through the fight. I was thinking to myself, because Fowler looked like he was gassing a bit,
yeah,
and I thought, you know, if Harper can bring this into the later rounds, then he might have a bit of a chance here. If Fowler gets really, really tired, but that didn't materialize. Fowler just kept going. I mean, the round, you could hear the corners in between rounds. Give me one more. Give me one more. Give me one more. And when you're saying that, just give me one more. It's just like, well, what? Give you one more round of getting the shit beaten out of you.
yeah,
They probably should have stopped that before it was actually stopped.
yeah, absolutely. And I do think with Harper, you know, the corner must have been able to see that he wasn't even stunning Fowler, so he was just like a glorified punch bag at times.
Yeah.
The way he was just on the ropes and no movement at all. And I think some of the low blows was a bit dubious as well.
Yeah. And this is the problem about, on a more broader scale, of mismatching fighters, right? Because well, I mean, how good was that for Fowler last night in terms of his development, and then for Harper, getting a hiding like that doesn't do him any good. So,
No.
you know, it's okay. Yeah, it was good to have the experience of being in against someone that's much better than you, but to get, you know, that was horrific at times, right?
Yeah, I don't really understand what either of them would have learned, because Fowler wouldn't have really learnt much from what he didn't know already.
No, not at all.
So yeah, I suppose maybe it's because it was only his second fight with McGuigan and they wanted to work on a few things, but even someone similar to a Sam Eggington, I think that would have been more beneficial for him having an opponent
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. I mean, I don't. It's tough as well. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh because it's obviously the environment that we're in now. You know, you don't have a whole
Yeah,
slew of opponents to pick from, right?
yeah,
It's a case of who wants it.
yeah, yeah. So
So that was a very one-sided fight that probably shouldn't have lasted as long as it did.
no, what did it go? 7 out of 10 or something like that, wasn't it?
I think so,
Yeah. So
but
yeah,
it was very one-sided. Seven.
yeah. I know Peter Fury in particular. He put on Twitter about that's how some of the fighters, no matter how tough they are, but that's how they can really get things like brain damage and whatnot. And
Yeah, yeah,
he was making a case of him being pulled out after I think it was 4 rounds.
yeah. And this is the thing about boxing. When you talk to older people as well, people that were watching boxing in the 60s, 70s, and they look at that and they're like, "Well, there's nothing wrong with that." And it's like, well, you know, back in those times, you virtually didn't have health and safety, right? And this is where health
Yeah,
and safety affects all parts of our lives, whether you like it or not, right? You have to look after the safety of the fighters, right? It doesn't matter how old you are, what you're doing. It's what kind of sport it is. It's long term effects. How
yeah,
that's going, and that's just where we had a bit of a chat. We touched on this slightly last week with Ted Cheeseman, right?
yes, yeah,
And I brought up that he takes far more punches than he needs to. And so we did question how long is Cheeseman going to be able to go on for, right?
yeah, yeah. And I think it's segueing slightly, but I think that's the worry for Dave Allen, particularly him being heavyweight as well, and the
Yeah,
amount of punches he takes.
yeah, he does. He does have a tendency to take a lot of punches to get because he's a smaller heavyweight in terms of his height. I don't
Yeah,
know. Is he what? He must only be 6 foot or something, is he?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
believe so.
and
And
and he's fighting in a weight division with giants, right?
yeah,
And it's you need to watch what the hell you're doing.
yeah, and I think in particular the fight that made me realise about him was the Tony Yoka fight that he took when he went over to France.
I have not seen that fight. I have not seen that fight.
Yeah,
Um,
so
what card was that on? Can you remember? Was it a
yeah,
Monaco? Was it a Monaco
uh,
show?
no, it wasn't a matchroom one. I found it on a stream somehow, but yeah, I think he basically took the Eurostar to France and went by himself, and he got absolutely
Oh,
bashed pillow to post for about 9 or 10 rounds.
well, you remember when he fought David Price? I mean,
Yes,
you could hear them in the corner when he was sitting down. I think what was he saying? He couldn't see, or he was seeing three of David Price or something,
yeah,
which is I mean, David Price is huge anyway, but you imagine
yeah,
trying to fight a guy when you think there's three huge
yeah,
guys there.
yeah, yeah. I
So
think
it's concerning, right? It's a concerning thing.
yeah. I think definitely maybe people, I don't know if they have it in boxing already, but there should be people that look into these matchups just to make sure that they're not going to become too one-sided like
One-sided.
what
Yeah,
yeah, like what we see with the Fowler fight last night.
yeah. Uh, and that's how it should be. The only problem with this is money, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and this is where mean, I'm not generally for regulation, but someone needs to, because, if you say, oh, we can get this guy, but we're going to have to pay him that much, so we can't afford that, so we'll get a guy that's cheap and just get the shit beaten out of him. I think boxers need to be more realistic, especially now, right? Especially in the
Yeah,
situation we're in now, that you're not going to be able to get the big purses now because the amount of job losses in this country that has happened since March has been incredible, and it's going to carry on. So
yeah,
I'm afraid I don't know, but I don't know if you can regulate that or what, but someone's going to have to do something.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then we come to the main event of last night, Jonas and Terry Harper. A fairly good fight. I think I'm fair to say it's better than we both expected in the preview.
Yeah. So this was a really good fight. I don't know. See, it kind of. I don't know how much it saved the overall show in terms of being overall, because a lot
Mm,
of these fights leading up to this were one-sided, and then Jonas Harper wasn't one-sided.
yeah,
Um, so we'll see how that goes for Eddie Hearn. But yeah, the fight itself, very competitive, very close. We were communicating constantly about this last night. I know it's contentious, but I thought a draw was the right result.
yeah,
What
yeah.
about yourself?
Yeah, I agree. Watching it live, I don't know if it was just maybe because I see a few scorecards on Twitter and whatnot, but I felt Harper may have been winning, but I can't argue with a draw, and I think the rematch will be just as good when that happens.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Matthew Macklin had a draw on his card, so I actually thought from last week and this week, his cards have actually been pretty decent, right? For Macklin. I mean, I know I've not been his biggest fan, but I agreed with Macklin's result. I don't know if I agreed with every round that he scored it. But
Yeah,
I text you last night at the end of the ninth round. I said, I've got Jonas up by one. And then I text you at the end of the 10th saying Harper won that round. I've got a draw.
yeah,
And as I said, that I wouldn't have been outraged if it had been given a round either way, because it's so close, but so for me, a draw was the right result. Not that you always like to have a winner, but I couldn't split them last night.
yeah. I agree. I don't think any of either of them done anything conclusive enough to say that this person's won by a few rounds or whatnot, one
Yeah.
way or the other. But one person who thought it was a robbery and thinks the British scoring system is corrupt, and that's Mr. Gallagher. Yeah, he was demanding to see the official scorecards, and yes, it's fair to say he didn't agree with the decision yesterday.
Yeah, well, I mean, you and I pretty much agree on this. Maybe slightly different there. So, I mean, I don't think I'm a terrible judge of things, and I doubt you are either. So, how he can have a completely different opinion to me and you is, I'm a big believer of um, things are how they seem, right?
Yeah,
So the saying, if um, if you think someone's out to get you, they probably are. So I'm a big believer in
yeah,
that statement. But it's in the broader concept that things are actually how they seem. So it seemed to me that this fight was close and it was a draw, and I could have given it. If you'd picked one either way, I wouldn't have grumbled. So for Gallagher to then go on this crusade now of that this was a complete robbery, for me, is just bullshit. It's just
yeah. Well,
bullshit. And I've seen from what I saw in the pre-match, the build up and the week leading up to the fight, the
yeah,
guy. is over controlling. He's over, I don't know what the word is. I don't know if he just thinks he's got a sense of entitlement, or he's just arrogant, or what. But I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know.
I think in football terms, you would say he's a bit of a prima donna, really.
That's the best way to describe him. That's you picked up the best terminology there. So that's I think it's arrogance.
Yeah.
I think it's probably the best way to describe it. Or but I don't think I don't is there. I haven't heard anyone complain apart there's being a robbery apart from him.
Yeah, and I know Sky get a fair amount of criticism, but I think pretty much everyone there, Johnny, Adam, Matt Macklin, they all sort of agree it's a draw, and I don't see how all three of those can be wrong.
Yeah, no, neither can I. I mean, I understand there might be a narrative from Sky, say, to think, well, let's get it a draw so we can see it again because it was a great fight, pushing that kind of narrative. Fair enough.
Yeah,
But you're talking about, there's only so much you can get away with. You can't look at a really one-sided fight and say, "Oh, that was a draw." Right? You just won't
no,
get away with that, right? So for
yeah,
Gallagher what Gallagher's saying is it was a one-sided fight,
yeah,
right? So you can't, you know, you literally can't get away with that
yeah,
because there's
and
always difference of opinion between people, and there would be, if you take four people and put them in a room and take a subject, they will all, the chances are two of them will agree, two of them won't agree. But the fact that you've got no one basically disagreeing with the result, apart from Gallagher, then it just shows you he's, I don't know what he's thinking.
yeah. I think in a degree to a degree it suits his narrative because in the build up he very much had the belief of Sky's 100% team Harper and we need the knockout to win almost. So I think he may feel aggrieved that his thoughts pre-fight have come to fruition. But yeah, as you say, no one agrees with him that I've seen personally. So
Perhaps, but I mean, you can do it in a diplomatic way. You can be calm and you can say, look, I thought my fighter won that fight.
yeah,
I thought the judging wasn't that great, and I'll have a look at it and whatever. But and I think you said he would. I don't have Twitter because it's a terrible place in my opinion. But you
yeah,
said he's been tweeting out stuff, and this is, again, Twitter's not the place to do it, right?
yeah. And he was sort of liking and sharing the people's basically all of these gym fighters and ex-fighters and Tony Bellew to an extent. They was all sort of pushing the narrative on there that Jonas got robbed and she was done out of the win.
Yeah, and again, this is all about bias for me. We were speaking about this
Yeah,
before we came online, that everyone has biases, and that's fair enough, right? You're not going to be able to eradicate that, but
yeah,
you've it is what it is, right? And when if I'm just worried about people going overboard with this, right? Because if you say, look, if you're a calm, rational person, you say, I thought Jonas won, you know, lay out your case for it,
yeah,
let's try and do something, fair enough. But when you're going on Twitter, oh, this is an outrage, and da 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 da, and then there's all sorts of people jumping on the bandwagon. It's classless for me, and that's why I don't like Twitter, because it just blows things out of proportion,
yeah,
because there's
yeah,
so many people involved.
yeah. I tend to agree. So we'll say that that's probably the fair result. We look forward to the rematch and we just see what happens now, I guess, for them.
Yeah, hopefully a rematch can be made, because it was a good fight, and I thought a draw was a fair result. And I'd like to see that again. And I've spoken to you before, and I've spoken on this podcast before. I am not a huge fan of women's boxing, but it's fights like these, and if we can see another one, that's only going to help
Yeah,
women's boxing,
absolutely.
and get people like me who are a little bit skeptical of it back, to support it a bit more.
Yeah, yeah. And I suppose the other big bit of news in the last few days is the news from the WBC that Dillian Whyte will get the winner of Fury and Wilder 3.
Yeah,
And I think it's about time, really, isn't it?
yeah. So, I mean, I don't know when the Fury Wilder 3 fight is going to be, but the timing is going to be, because I've heard that it's going to be December sometime, and
Yeah,
White's supposed to be February. So if they fight in December, that's 3 months. So that's only 9 weeks, maybe 10 weeks. I say you need a
yeah,
12-week camp at timing. So okay, you can push it a month maybe, but that's going to have to happen. That's now. So you've got the problems here. There's two problems. There's the contract between Fury and Wilder, right?
yeah,
So if that, if things don't go the way with the virus, and then, because I've heard that the Wilder Fury 3 fight might get pushed as far back as February next year,
yeah,
which is, so they have a contract to fight. So, and then you have obviously WBC saying the winner of that fight has to fight Whyte next, but that is supposed to be by February. So, if Fury then says, well, I've got to fulfill my mandatory by, say, February next year, so that means I can't fight Wilder, that's going to have legal implications. And then if Fury decides, right, well, I know I'm going to fight Wilder because I'm contracted to do that, then that fight might end up being for no belt, because
yeah,
WBC could say, well, you're not fulfilling our mandatory in the time frame that we're giving, so we'll take that belt off you, and Whyte will fight someone else for it. So tricky situation. I do think it's fair that the WBC have done this, and I mean, it's really it's long overdue from them. So we'll
yeah,
see what's going to happen there. The bad thing about that is we're not going to see Fury v Joshua. Fury v Joshua. So at least
yeah.
until summer next year.
Yeah, and I see Eddie Hearn. He done an interview on the fact about Dillian Whyte becoming the mandatory, and he was saying, I don't know with the legal ramifications if it can happen, but if they are looking to push Wilder Fury 3 to February, that potentially Whyte v Fury could be as early as December this year.
Yeah. Well, it's all going to depend on. I mean, these big fights. They're going to need to have crowd. They're going to have a gate of some degree, or if not,
Yeah,
it's going to have to be later in the year before the economy recovers. Because right now there ain't a lot of people that have got the money to pay for pay-per-views, right? I mean, they've got the money, but it's
yeah. If
whether
they
or
want to
not
spend it on that, yeah,
pay-per-view um, is going to be, especially in America, right? The pay-per-views are horrendous, right? They're like $80, $90, right?
yeah, yeah,
Right, compared to the stuff in the UK. So we'll
yeah,
just have to see how that one develops. But I don't know, because Joshua, it doesn't look like Joshua's going to fight until probably the same time.
yeah, yeah. December, I
Then
think they're hoping.
and then he'll have. I don't think, when you look at just a summer, early autumn next year,
Yeah,
when the possible Fury Joshua fight could be made, I don't think both Fury and Joshua will be champion at that time.
no,
Because obviously Fury's got two very hard fights, and Wilder and Whyte by that time, and Joshua's going to have Pulev, and then straight after it he's going to have Usyk.
yeah,
Now, again, those are difficult fights. So there's a high chance that neither will be champion at that time, but there's obviously a high chance that they will be as well.
yeah. Yeah, well, I'm not that confident. I'm confident the fight will happen, but like you say, I don't think it will be all of the belts because I think there's bound to be one that's going to get fragmented with all these mandatories as well. Because you'll have another one coming up after Usyk, so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe even the Dillian Whyte fights for a vacant title against, I don't know, Usyk maybe or someone like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it could happen. It's just so uncertain right now with the way the business world is, and the virus and crowds
Yeah,
and things like that. So
yeah,
we'll just have to see how that pans out.
yeah. Talking of the business, I think that will lead us nicely to Mr. Frank Warren and the olive
Hmm.
branch, if you can call it that. He's handed Eddie Hearn.
Yeah. So for me, this is an act of desperation.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know whether that's true or not, but for previous to this, there was plenty of time. There have been plenty of occasions where Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn could have spoken to each other on the phone about fights, and then all of a sudden, Frank Warren randomly phones up Eddie Hearn. Now, we've seen in the past how negative Frank Warren is towards Matchroom and Eddie Hearn. So for him to all of a sudden just pick up the phone and try and get fight, and phone Eddie Hearn.
Yeah.
It's again, going back to my theory of things are how they seem. When we heard this, we thought this is desperation from Frank Warren. So I
Yeah.
think
Absolutely.
things
Yeah.
are how they seem in this case.
Yeah.
Not that I'm not saying that it's not good, because there are some decent fights on there that I would like to see.
Yeah.
But but again, I mean, I just think Frank Warren could do himself a favor by just saying, look, okay, I'm struggling a wee bit here. Boxing and a hose is struggling a wee bit here. Let's bury the hatches, let bygones be bygones, and let's try and get some of these fights done. I
Yeah.
think he would do himself a lot more favors by just being honest, right? Because everybody knows it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's it certainly doesn't add up why now he started doing it. And I think he's got an agenda to this, and it's also quite telling that he puts these A guys, if you like, against maybe being kind to him. Not Eddie Hearn's best fighters, let's put it that way.
Yeah. So he put his A guys against Eddie Hearn's B guys.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, okay, so I'll dispense with the whole Frank Warren is desperate thing, and I'll just assume this is just a genuine attempt to make fights. So let's have a look at I mean, for starters, the fights he's proposing to make, he's got Dubois versus Whyte. I mean, why he thinks that fight's, I mean, he might be able to make it in 2022 or 2023,
Yeah.
but Whyte's fighting Povetkin, and then he's going to fight for a world title, presumably,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
if right. So why on earth he thinks Whyte and Dubois are going to fight each other, I don't know, right? I'm just taking this on the top. And you've got
Yeah.
Yard versus Boazzi, right? Now, I've been wanting to see that fight for a long time, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Great fight. I think they can make that fight. The
Yeah.
problem here you're going to have is, and largely with the rest of this card, is they don't, for the next 6 months, a year, whatever, we're not going to have crowds, right? You know, BT and Matchroom are already probably planning what their pay-per-view events are, but you're going to have to make some of these fights pay-per-view, or they just won't get made because of the money that they've got to pay the
Yeah.
fighters.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, but just going on the fighting without talking about the money side of things, Yard Boazzi, great, make that fight, right? Then you've
Absolutely.
got
Yeah.
Joyce Chisora. Now, oh, I mean,
Wasn't that supposed to happen?
Joyce Chisora.
Yeah, when David Hay managed Joe Joyce, there was that whole thing, wasn't there?
I think they were talking about it, but well, the problem is the situation you're in now is that Chisora's trying to
Yeah,
fight Usyk, right?
yeah,
So now, if Chisora loses to Usyk, which I suspect he will, and if Joyce loses to Dubois, which I suspect he will, then that fight could be made. But that's not going to be until next year, at least, maybe the year after.
yeah, yeah. And I suppose with Chisora, he's very much at the end of his career. Does he
Mm-hmm.
really see an upside in fighting Joe Joyce? I don't think so.
No, but it depends. I think Chisora, yeah, Chisora's pretty clear. Chisora loves the green, right? Which it's not not a criticism of him whatsoever. And I think that fight will generate some money.
Yeah,
Under normal circumstances, anyway.
yeah.
And I don't think Joe Joyce wins that fight either. I don't care how
No,
old Chisora is. So that's one that could possibly be made. Now Williams versus Andrade, that's been ordered, right?
yes,
That's a fight. So that's not revolutionary there, right? That fight's going to happen anyway.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and then he's got
I I think with that one, I think Andrade will steamroll Williams. I've been a fan of Andrade for such
yeah,
a long
he is
time.
a very good boxer, Andrade.
Yeah,
I would expect Andrade to win that fight.
yeah.
So here
Uh,
we go. Yeah, no, carry on, carry on.
Yeah, and I remember when was it Brian Rose he fought Andrade quite early on in his career, and he steamrolled him, and I thought by then he was going to be some special talent.
Well, it could be, but I mean, we had the whole point with. At one point, we had Andrade was supposed to fight Billy Joe Saunders, and Billy Joe
Mm,
Saunders decided. I mean, that fight was, I think it was agreed, and then Billy Joe Saunders all of a sudden just decided no, moved up in weight. Now, to be fair, I think it was for a vacant world title.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, it was.
but the bigger fight was, in terms of commercially, was against Andrade.
Yeah, wasn't it fight week as well? That fight was Paul, wasn't it? Because of Billy Joe failed the drugs test or whatever happened.
Oh, it could have been. Yeah. Of course, because that's why it didn't happen initially,
Yeah,
um, because of the drug test and the nasal spray business. Well, according to Billy Joe, it was nasal spray,
yeah,
which I'm skeptical of because, well, not because, in fact, I don't say I'm skeptical of it. I should take that as fact because he doesn't. I don't think he has a history of cheating, but it's just Billy Joe Saunders overall. I'm skeptical of everything. He doesn't really doesn't do himself any favors, and
no,
he's had two very unsavory incidents. Now the second one, why you would say something like that on camera is
yeah,
incredible, but the first one is really bad, really bad. When he was goading this drug addict. I think she was
yeah,
was it a prostitute thing? I mean, that's awful, right?
yeah,
And we've spoken to me. I'm not one of these guys that's easily offended, and I think things that are funny that most people will find offended, but that's bad.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Anyway, we're
You would have,
segueing off into Billy Joe Saunders.
yeah. So you're firing Edwards then. What do you make of that one?
Yeah, so I'd be interested to see that one, although I don't know how viable that is to make. Have either of these guys got fights before this could even potentially be made? I don't know.
No, I know Eddie Hearn mentioned about he's lining up a world title fight for your fight.
Yeah,
I suppose they're both coming off losses, so it could be made, but I'm not sure
yeah,
there's really much interested in that one.
yeah. Okay, well, Gorman v Allen. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I was sort of saying earlier. For me, that's sort of a nothing fight for either of them because Dave Allen, with his record, it's such a win-loss. Maybe you could say that's more beneficial for him, maybe, but I don't see anything good can come from that for Gorman. I don't know about yourself.
Well, that's the thing with Gorman, because he's on Flatborn Show. If say he was to beat Dave Allen,
Yeah,
what's a step up from that? But he's not going to fight Dubois again. So
yeah,
where?
maybe a Wardley or someone like that, possibly.
Mm, oh,
But
I don't think that would be a good fight for Gorman, because Ward will be far too quick for him and far too good a boxer for Gorman. But anyway,
yes,
that's there. So I mean, I suppose that fight could be made. It's not one that, pardon my French, I've got a hard on over.
no, no.
But it might be decent.
Yeah. And then I think it's Shiraz and Cheeseman. I can't say I know too much about Shiraz. I don't know about you.
No, I don't know that much about him either, but I don't know if that fight can be made. I don't know what Cheeseman's looking to do. Cheeseman, obviously with his latest win, is looking to try and step up, and I don't know if Shiraz is a step up.
Yeah, I agree. I think Cheeseman will be more on the Fowler or Fitzgerald fight, personally.
Yeah, I think so. And because they're on match rooms, it's fairly easy to make.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Archie Sharp and Zelfa Barrett. Again, it's not one that I will be too bothered about seeing, really.
No, doesn't really get the blood pump in that one.
Yeah,
And Ben Jenkins has been ordered as well, right?
yeah, that was
But I
supposed to be
don't
on
know.
fight camp.
Yeah, so why did that do? Do we know why that didn't happen? I think it was Eddie Hearn not saying it was
Yeah,
happening. All of a sudden, it didn't.
yeah, I think Warren blocked it. I think Eddie Hearn done the deal with Jenks and manager.
Yeah, so of course this was in Warren's interview the other day.
By all means, he was happy with the deal, and then it just sort of fell through. I think.
I think Warren, because Hearn was making offers to the fighter directly and his management team.
Yeah,
Warren was obviously butthurt by that, which is fair enough, right? I mean, I've seen Eddie Hearn complain about the same thing, but when the fight's agreed, if they've agreed to it,
yeah. You would
I
think it
think
would.
that should still go ahead, and then Frank Warren can then phone up Eddie Hearn and say, "Look, next time, or if you're looking to make, please do it through me."
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, so that sort of covers what Frank Warren has suggested. I doubt it will happen. I think it's just
No, but these fights, even the fights that are realistic to be made, they would have to happen over multiple shows, right? You
yeah,
couldn't put, if he's looking at that as two separate cards, that ain't gonna happen, right?
no. And I just think it's too complicated with Sky and BT. I think I saw an interview with Shane McGuigan, and he made a great point. How would it work? Would sort of like Sky get the Buatsi and Yard, and then BT get the Gorman Allen fight. It's just I think there's too many bricks in the road for it to make it.
Yeah, there is. There's wait. The thing is, because unless they're going to do unless they're going to do cross networks, right?
Yeah,
If these fights had to be on one or the other, Frank
yeah,
Warren is not going to let any of these fights go on to Sky.
no,
Because if we know Frank Warren, right, he's not going to say Yard Buatsi. So Yard Buatsi, I think, is the most realistic and probably the most exciting fight on there, right?
yeah, absolutely.
So if just say they're in negotiations with fight, okay, we're going to pay Yard this, we're going to pay Buatsi this, everyone's agreed, and it comes down to, right, which channel are we going to put this on? Right, we'll put this on Sky because it's going to get the most exposure, right? Do you think Frank Warren is just going to go, yeah, fine? No,
No,
no chance, right? And the other way around, if Frank says, well, we'll put it on BT because it's on BT, well, Eddie Hearn's going to say, but it's Sky's got far more viewers than BT does, so why
Yeah,
put it on BT? So again, there's a lot of, this is a huge hurdle to overcome if they
yeah,
can't put it on both.
yeah. And I suppose the one that we want to see above all of these is the AJ and Fury fight, which I'm a bit dubious if we'll see that, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, if we get if we get to the point where everybody's fought their obligations to fight with mandatories and etc., and they're both still champion next year at some point. I
Yeah,
mean, that fight, I think that fight will get made and it'll do an incredible amount. It'll do incredibly well, but I'm skeptical of whether this is the thing. There's so much uncertainty with Joshua right now, right? Because he fought and got beat by Andy Ruiz. Okay, he avenged that and beat Andy Ruiz fighting a way that is not usual for him, right?
yeah,
So people are looking at Joshua now and saying, is this the Joshua going forward, the boxing Joshua, right?
yeah. I think he just
And
sort of implemented that just to win that fight.
yeah, that's what I think. But so it's kind of it's in. There's a bigger question mark over Joshua now with how is he going to fight going forward. I think the Joshua that fights Klitschko, that Joshua, right,
Yeah,
beats Tyson Fury, right?
yeah, I agree. Yeah,
But it's whether the Andy Ruiz defeat that he had is going to have something in his mind that holds him back from, because he was an extremely aggressive fighter.
yeah. I think the one good thing though from that defeat was AJ's team bringing in Angel Fernandez.
Yeah. Yeah, but you could see because in in that second Andy Ruiz fight, and I know boxers, right? When I say that, I know people that have boxed, right?
Yeah,
Now, one of the things that they tell me, virtually all of them, is that trying to keep a cool head when someone's hitting you is a very difficult thing to do, right?
yes, yeah,
Right? Like guys sitting there, they've said to me, look, when someone's punching you in the face, all you want to do is headbutt them and kick them and elbow them, right? And basically just like fight like you would fight in the street.
yeah,
So it's we're gonna have to see how um, we're gonna have to see how Joshua's mentality holds up, for when he comes to fight Fury.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. So as we said, that's all sort of up in the air. I would take a huge pinch of salt with what Warren suggested, and we just hope that maybe we can see one or two of those fights.
Yeah, I would like to see one or two of these fights, but I would say Dubois White's unrealistic. Let's say unrealistic. That just won't happen.
Yeah,
Yard Boazzi, I think I would really like to see that on there. And I don't know. Picking a fight, picking a winner in that fight's tough, right? Because obviously the Yard Kovalev fight was, I mean, Yard was very close
yeah,
beating Kovalev in that fight, very very close.
yeah,
And Boazzi, he hasn't fought anyone like Sergey Kovalev, so we'll have to see. And they're very different. It's a strange thing because you look at Boazzi, he looks like a kind of, when you look at his frame and his body, he looks like a skinny kind of guy at that weight. And then you look at Yard, and
yeah,
he's built like a tank, right?
yeah. Polar opposites, definitely.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one there.
Yes.
But I just want to see Joyce Dubois get out of the way so you can
Yeah.
have that.
Yeah.
And it would be, for me, it would be hilarious if Joe Joyce won that fight.
Yeah.
Absolutely hilarious. but
Yeah.
I don't think he will.
No. Well, I think we've covered a good amount today.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we'll have a preview going up of fight count number 3, and perhaps maybe even touch on the Carl-Frampton card on BT as well later in the week.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah. So I think that will bring the end to today's episode. Thanks for listening, guys. Don't forget to like up
Yeah. Cheers, everyone.
and give it a share. That'd be much appreciated. Thanks for listening.